My parents paid for my sister's entire college education, law. Meanwhile, they called me in for a chat and said that my course didn't offer a future. I was still trying to argue, showing him my designs, when my father interrupted. "Son, stop dreaming. Get a real job." That night, I folded the design I was showing him, put it in my backpack, and left home. At that moment, I didn't know it would be the last time they would see me. I cut off contact with everyone and disappeared. 4 years later, my sister was in my meeting room looking at me as if I were a ghost. Sunday dinner seemed like any other. The smell of roast chicken, the impeccably set table, and the laughter filling the air. Until Mariana's name was mentioned. "Our daughter is a source of pride," said her father, raising his wine glass. "As for Lucas, well, he still doesn't know what he wants from life." The comment broke the mood, but no one defended him. Lucas remained silent, chewing slowly to hide his embarrassment. He always knew his parents preferred his sister, but hearing it out loud, in front of her, hurt more than he expected. Mariana smiled, satisfied, adjusting her hair with feigned humility. "Not everyone was born for great things, right, Mom?" she teased. The father laughed. "Your social media course, Lucas, honestly, what does it teach you? To be on your phone all day?" The young man took a deep breath, trying not to answer. The mother looked away, unable to intervene. It had always been like this. When it came to her failing son, silence was the rule. When the subject turned to Mariana's graduation, Lucas felt a pang in his chest. His parents had paid for everything: tuition, housing, trips. For him, no help, only the pressure to stand on his own 2 feet. He remembered the sleepless nights, balancing internships and odd jobs to pay for his own studies. "Oh, and you haven't even finished yet, have you?" his father teased. "Maybe it's time to think about something serious, my son." Mariana laughed loudly. "How about law? I can teach you some basic laws." The laughter echoed like razor blades. Lucas put down his fork and took a deep breath, feeling his blood boil. "Do you really think my course is worthless?" he asked, his voice trembling. His father looked at him as if speaking to a child. "Lucas, it's not a matter of thinking. It's reality. We only want what's best for you." The young man stood up, his heart pounding. "Then stop saying you want what's best for you when you only believe in what you understand." The atmosphere at the table changed instantly. The mother asked for calm. Mariana rolled her eyes. The father crossed his arms. "If that's how you feel, maybe you need some time to think." Lucas laughed nervously. "I've thought too much already. You don't need to worry about me anymore." He went to the room, grabbed his backpack, and started putting in some clothes. With each folded piece, he remembered a swallowed scorn, a word that made him doubt himself. When he finished, he looked around. The room seemed smaller, suffocating, as if it had never truly been his. He went back into the room, looked at the 3 of them, and said, "Thank you for teaching me what it's like to have nowhere to go back to." His father snorted. Mariana muttered something about drama, and his mother tried to hold him back by the arm. "Son, don't go like that." He smiled without looking back. "Like what?" The door slammed shut, but the sound echoed inside him like thunder. Outside, the cold night wind seemed more welcoming than the home he was leaving behind. For the first time, he didn't know what awaited him, and yet he felt a strange relief. You know what's worse than being humiliated by your own family. It's having to prove your worth with no one to support you. If you've ever felt this way, forgotten, discredited, or judged by those who should be supporting you the most, then subscribe to the channel now. Because here, each story shows that yesterday's scorn can be the reason for your victory tomorrow. Click the registration button and experience the truth that your worth doesn't depend on anyone's approval.
Lucas wandered aimlessly through the streets, his backpack on his back and his heart heavy. The city lights seemed to mock his loneliness. He tried to pretend it was just another walk, but he knew that from then on, nothing would be the same. No future, his father's voice echoed in his mind like a scratched record. He called an old friend, Vinicius, who welcomed him with open arms. The old sofa in the shared apartment became his new bed. The nights were long and the days exhausting, but the simple fact of being away from his family's disdain made him breathe easier. The first few weeks were a test of endurance. Lucas got a job as a server in a diner and spent hours on his feet, serving people who didn't even look at him. Still, there was a spark of pride in each day he had overcome on his own. At night, he studied on a computer borrowed from the university. The blue and white screens of social media seemed like a universe apart, where creativity and strategy could be worth more than surnames and traditional degrees. He believed in this with all his might, even when the world called him a dreamer.
One day, a customer at the snack bar started talking about his business, complaining about low sales. Lucas, shyly, commented that the problem might be in the way the company presented itself online. The man laughed, disbelieving, but wrote the young man's name on a napkin. The following week, the same customer returned and said, "Hey kid, want to try managing my business's social media? I'll pay you a nominal fee, and if it works out, we can continue." That was enough to ignite something within Lucas. This wasn't just a chance, it was the beginning of everything. He threw himself into the project as if his very life depended on it. He created creative posts, responded to customers, and revamped the visual identity. In just a few weeks, the profile grew and sales increased. The owner was impressed and introduced him to other local entrepreneurs. For the first time, Lucas received payment for something he loved doing. It wasn't much, but it was his. Maybe I can do it after all, he thought, looking at his phone screen and watching the results climb. His self-confidence was beginning to be reborn. On a quiet night, he wrote in his notebook a phrase that would become his mantra. "I will prove that it does have a future." That personal promise would accompany him for years, fueling him through every fall and propelling him forward in every victory. Outside, the city slept. Lucas looked out the window and saw his reflection blended with the distant lights. The rejected boy still lived inside him, but now he shared space with something new: determination. It was the end of the pain and the beginning of the journey. The following months were a silent marathon. Lucas would wake up before sunrise, put on his crumpled diner uniform, and walk to work. He served coffee, cleaned tables, and listened to laughter that seemed to mock his own life. Still, each day he endured was a personal victory. At night, he would return to his cramped room and open his old computer. The shaky letters on the screen and the slow connection were the only luxuries he could afford. He watched tutorials, read articles, and signed up for free courses. The digital world was his escape, and without realizing it, it was also becoming his redemption. While his roommates talked about parties and weekends, he dreamed of creating something of his own. "One day, I'll have my own agency," he repeated silently. They laughed, amused by the ambition of someone who barely had enough money to pay the rent. Lucas smiled back, unoffended. He had already learned that other people's laughter doesn't define anyone. Over time, small jobs began to appear. A clothing store asked for help with Instagram. A salon wanted to improve the reach of its posts. Nothing paid much, but each successful result was a spark of hope. He saw the power of his ideas changing the reality of other people, and that strengthened him. Despite the progress, loneliness was constant. Some days he thought about calling his mother, but his pride held him back. "They chose to believe her, not me," he murmured. Then he would return to work, convinced that silence was his safest shield. One night, while organizing his finances,
he realized he could finally support himself without depending on the snack bar. It was a modest but symbolic achievement. He quit his job the next day, feeling light for the first time. From then on, he would live only for what he loved. However, the road was far from easy. Bills piled up, some clients disappeared without paying, and days of hunger returned. But Lucas no longer saw this as weakness. It was part of building who he would become. The weight of rejection still haunted him, but now it served as fuel. To each criticism, he responded with results. With each painful memory, he remembered the boy who once believed in himself, even when no one else did. At the end of one of those nights, looking at the illuminated screen, Lucas smiled. One day, they'll see. And for the first time, he didn't say it with resentment, but with the serenity of someone who knows that time takes its toll with more elegance than revenge. It was a sweltering afternoon when fate decided to change its rhythm. One of the businessmen he had worked for recommended him to a friend who owned an appliance store. "The kid is good. He has different ideas," they said. The man got in touch, requesting a simple meeting. Lucas arrived with his shirt pressed and a makeshift portfolio and paper folders. The owner observed him skeptically, but listened to his ideas. When the young man presented an engagement plan to increase online sales, the businessman simply nodded and said, "Okay, let's test it." In the following days, Lucas immersed himself in the project as if it were his last chance. He spent nights creating content, analyzing trends, and responding to customers. In a short time, the store's page skyrocketed in followers, and sales began to grow visibly. The owner, impressed, not only paid him well, but also recommended him to other partners. The news spread quickly. Small businesses began contacting him, curious about how this young man was achieving such impressive results with so few resources. Lucas realized there was something there, a real chance to turn talent into a profession.
He mustered his courage, called his friend Gabriel, a talented designer who worked as a freelancer, and proposed a partnership. "We can open a digital agency," he said, with a new sparkle in his eye. Gabriel hesitated, but accepted the challenge. The seed of what would change their lives was born there. The first few months were chaotic. They worked from a makeshift room with a noisy fan and 2 borrowed chairs. They divided tasks, slept little, and celebrated each client as if they were a prize. Their youthful energy mixed with necessity made them an unbeatable duo. Even as he grew older, Lucas didn't forget the past. Sometimes he would look at his phone and think about texting his mother just to say he was okay. But something inside him told him it wasn't time yet. There was still much to achieve before closing that chapter. One early morning, as they were wrapping up a campaign, Gabriel joked, "One day we'll look back and laugh about all this." Lucas smiled, but deep down he knew when that day came, he wouldn't laugh. He would simply understand that every tear and every humiliation had been the price of victory. The first big payment arrived in the account 2 months later. Lucas looked at the balance and, for a few seconds, couldn't believe it. This wasn't just money. It was living proof that he was right. For the first time, the future no longer seemed like a distant dream. It was real, and it was starting now. Mornings began to take on a new meaning. Instead of the sound of the alarm clock signaling the start of work, what woke Lucas was the enthusiasm of building something of his own. The small room he shared with Gabriel now resembled a creative hub. In the corner, an improvised table with laptops, wires, and notes marked the beginning of the agency they dreamed of. They named the project Insight Digital, a simple name but full of symbolism. Because everything starts with an insight, Lucas used to say. The phrase became their motto. With each client they won, they learned a little more about the market, about people, and above all, about themselves. In the beginning, nothing was glamorous. There was a lack of structure and abundance of exhaustion. The two shared packed lunches, printed contracts at internet cafes, and celebrated each like as an epic victory. Even so, there was something magical in that chaos, the feeling of being on the right track.
One of the jobs that most marked the beginning of their journey was at a local bakery. The owner, skeptical, thought that social media was for teenagers. A month later, sales had doubled. Lucas and Gabrielle looked at the growth chart and felt an almost childlike joy. It was the first concrete step towards what had previously seemed impossible. Over time, they began receiving messages from other entrepreneurs. "You guys who manage the social media for Juan's Bakery, I want to know if you do quotes." These simple words represented a miracle for those who, months before, didn't even have a place to sleep. Despite the victories, fear still lingered. Lucas knew that one mistake could cost him everything. That's why he worked tirelessly, studying and improving himself. Each sleepless night was a promise that he would never again be the boy rejected at the dinner table. One night, looking at Gabrielle sleeping on the keyboard, Lucas felt a lump in his throat. His friend believed in him more than his own family. "One day I'll repay all of this," he whispered. And in that instant, he understood that success, however individual it might seem, was built together. With their modest growth, they decided to formalize the business. They created a CNPJ, a Brazilian tax ID, opened a business bank account, and bought a simple banner with the agency's name. When they hung the sign, Lucas stood there for a few seconds, just watching. That sign wasn't made of metal. It was made of overcoming challenges. Deep down, he knew it was still just the beginning. But the first step had already been taken, and there was no turning back. For the first time, he wasn't running from the past. He was running toward the future. Initial success brought with it the weight of responsibilities. With more clients came the first growing pains. Tight deadlines, late payments, and sleepless nights became routine. Enthusiasm began to share space with exhaustion. One day, an important client simply disappeared without paying the contract. It was a hard blow. Lucas tried to stay calm, but despair grew as the bills piled up. "Maybe I'm not that good after all," he murmured. Gabrielle interrupted him. "You are good, man. You just haven't been recognized as you deserve yet." That phrase kept him standing. However, the digital world is cruel. One posting mistake, one misinterpreted comment, and his reputation could be ruined. Lucas realized that success required more than talent. It required emotional resilience, and he was still learning how to deal with that.
Meanwhile, memories of the past kept returning. Sometimes she dreamed of the dinner that changed her life. She saw her father laughing, her sister mocking, her mother silent. She would wake up in a cold sweat, her heart racing. It was as if every achievement still needed to be proven before that invisible tribunal. Despite the difficulties, the partnership with Gabriel grew stronger. The two became brothers in arms. They shared dreams, debts, and even the fear of failure. Amid so much uncertainty, they found strength to continue in their mutual support. During one of their worst months, when they were thinking of giving up, they received an unexpected invitation to speak at a small local event about digital marketing. Lucas almost refused, but Gabriel insisted. "Go there and show what you know. Even if nobody believes in you, we believe in you." The speech was simple, but true. Lucas spoke about the difficulties, the prejudice against new professions, and how effort can transform even the greatest contempt into motivation. At the end, the audience gave him a standing ovation. And amidst that applause, he felt something new being born: confidence. From that day on, something changed inside him. He was no longer the wounded boy trying to prove his worth. He was a rising professional, aware of his own potential. The pain still existed, but now it served as fuel. Back in his makeshift office, Lucas wrote another sentence in his notebook. "Those who laugh at my beginnings will applaud me in the end." And as he closed the notebook, he realized that the end of the humiliation wouldn't come with revenge, it would come with victory. With the name Insight Digital starting to circulate, Lucas and Gabriel realized they needed to take the next step. They rented a small commercial space, cramped, hot, and poorly lit, but it was their first official office. When they first stepped inside, they felt like they were stepping into the beginning of something big. They painted the walls white and used cardboard boxes as tables. The sound of the old fan competed with the clicking of keyboards. The hours blurred together, time vanished, and the two barely noticed their fatigue. Each campaign delivered, each satisfied client was another brick in the construction of a dream. Lucas learned to deal with deadlines, contracts, and even the anxiety that made him doubt himself. He began to see work not just as a means of survival, but as a purpose. Gabriel, always optimistic, would say, "Man, it's not just an agency, we're changing the mindset of those who didn't believe in us."
One day, one of their first customers, the bakery that had spurred their start, showed up with a cake. "To celebrate your success," said the owner, smiling. Lucas was speechless. Coming from someone so humble, that meant more than any award. It was confirmation that they were on the right track. Over time, they began to hire help. First an intern, then a copywriter, and little by little, the small room filled with energy and laughter. The atmosphere became lighter, more vibrant. Lucas, now as a leader, understood the weight and beauty of the responsibility of guiding people. Even so, he still carried the shadow of the past. Sometimes, seeing happy families entering cafes, he remembered his mother and how much he wanted to show that he was okay. But the wound was still too recent to allow for forgiveness. One Friday night, after a long day of campaigning, he and Gabriel stood gazing out the living room window. Outside, the city lights twinkled like urban stars. "You know what's craziest?" Gabriel said. "Nobody believed in us. Not even us." Lucas laughed. "That's right. Now it's too late to give up." At the end of that month, revenue exceeded all expectations. For the first time, they were able to invest in new equipment and improve the space. When they installed the new sign with the agency's name on the facade, Lucas ran his hand over the letters and felt his chest warm. This is just the beginning, he thought. That night, as he locked the office door, he looked back and saw his reflection in the glass. The humiliated boy no longer existed. In his place was a man building his own destiny. Success inevitably led him to places where the past awaited him. Insight Digital was invited to an entrepreneurship event, and Lucas accepted the invitation to participate as a speaker. When he arrived at the venue, in a well-tailored suit and a CEO badge, he felt a silent pride. Little did he know that that night would bring the reunion he had avoided for years. While chatting with other professionals, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Lucas." Turning around, he saw Mariana. Time had given her elegance, but also a tired look. She smiled, cold and condescending. "I can't believe it. You're here. Still messing with the internet?" Lucas took a deep breath, remaining calm. "Yes, and it seems to be working out." She chuckled softly, as if it were a joke. "Good for you. I'll stay at the law firm, working for real." The sentence hit him like a slap, but he didn't react. He simply returned a calm smile. "That's good. Everyone follows the future they chose."
During the event, the two ended up being called to adjacent panels. Mariana seemed bothered by the attention Lucas was receiving. The audience listened to him with genuine interest, something she rarely achieved. For the first time, The brother she had despised seemed to be someone admired. At the end of the night, she approached him again. "You know, I even admire your persistence, but don't fool yourself. This internet thing is just a fad. When it's over, you'll need something concrete." Lucas looked her in the eyes, without anger. "Maybe, but as long as the fad lasts, I'll make a living from it, and a good one." He said goodbye with a firm handshake and left the place. Outside, the fresh air seemed like a reward for having kept his cool. That encounter hadn't hurt him, it had strengthened him. For the first time, he realized he didn't need to prove anything. Life itself was already proving it for him. In the following days, Lucas returned to work with a different kind of energy. The anger had transformed into fuel. "She'll see what this trend does," he joked with Gabriel, laughing. But deep down, he knew it wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. Months later, the agency began closing deals with large companies. Lucas's name started circulating at events and in business articles. When his mother saw him on television by chance, she remained silent for several minutes. Her husband, uncomfortable, changed the channel. Fate was slowly beginning to prepare the ground for reckoning, but Lucas didn't know it yet. He was too busy living the future that, one day, they said he would never have. Insight Digital no longer fit in the small room where it all began. In less than 2 years, the agency had become a regional benchmark. Clients arrived through referrals, social media exploded, and Lucas's name began to be mentioned at events and on specialized portals. The rejected boy had become the face of a new generation of entrepreneurs. The new office was in a modern building with glass walls and panoramic views of the city. Lucas, in a blazer and with a discreet smile, watched the young employees working with enthusiasm. That energy reminded him of the beginning, of the late nights with Gabriel, of the boxes used as desks, of the insatiable desire to succeed. With growth came the challenges of leadership. He needed to learn to delegate, to trust, and above all, to keep his feet on the ground. Success is a test of humility, he always told himself. Still, there were nights when he looked at the ceiling and wondered if he really was ready for the magnitude of it all.
Gabriel, now an equal partner, remained by his side, maintaining the good humor and lightheartedness that balanced Lucas's perfectionism. "Relax, boss," he joked. "You've already won. The rest is a bonus." Lucas laughed, but he knew that the real victory had not yet happened, not while part of him was still seeking recognition from the one who had rejected him. The name Insight Digital appeared in a business magazine. The article highlighted the agency's meteoric rise and the inspiring story of its founder. It was there that the past caught up with him uninvited. A call from his mother after 4 years of silence. He didn't answer. In the following days, the memories returned like ghosts. He remembered the backpack, the cold wind, the pain in his chest when he left home. But now there was something different. He didn't feel anger, only distance. It was like watching an old movie whose ending he already knew. Amid this mix of emotions, a new contract appeared, the biggest one yet. A multinational company was interested in signing with the agency. When Lucas saw the client's name, he froze. Miller and Braga Associated Lawyers, the office where Mariana worked. Fate seemed to be playing a trick on him. As the open email flashed on the screen, Lucas took a deep breath. "It's just another client," he told himself. But deep down, he knew that this contract carried an emotional weight that no amount of money could buy. He signed the agreement. For the first time, the boy with no future would be responsible for the public image of the company where his sister was a star. Life, at last, was beginning to settle accounts. The first day of the meeting with the Miller and Braga representatives was fraught with tension. Lucas entered the room with a confident posture, but his heart was racing. When the door opened and Mariana appeared with a folder in her hands, time seemed to stand still. She looked at him with surprise and embarrassment. "You," was all she managed to say. Lucas smiled professionally. I'm responsible for your company's communication campaign. It's a pleasure working with you." Her expression mixed disbelief and wounded pride. The brother she called the dreamer was now on the other side of the table, hiring and giving orders. During the meeting, he maintained a neutral tone, while Mariana avoided eye contact. The other directors praised his proposal, admiring his professionalism and the clarity of his ideas. In the end, the contract was signed, and deep down, Lucas felt that something bigger had come to an end there.
Weeks later, the campaigns began to run. The result was a resounding success. Increased searches, new clients, and growth that even caught the attention of the media. But, ironically, within the company, things began to crumble. Mariana was laid off in a restructuring, taking with her debts and the weight of failure. One afternoon, while reviewing reports in the office, Lucas received a notification on his cell phone. A message from Mariana. "I need to talk to you. It's important." He read it, took a deep breath, and put the phone down on the table. He didn't reply. In the following days, she persisted. She called, sent emails, long and emotional messages, until finally he showed up in person at Insight Digital. When the receptionist informed him, Lucas was silent for a few seconds before saying, "Let them in." Mariana entered hesitantly, her eyes brimming with tears and her tone humble. "Lucas, I lost everything. I need a job. Anything. I know I made a mistake, but please." The scene was a mirror image of the past. He watched her in silence, remembering the laughter, the words, the glances. Calmly, he replied, "You were right. My course didn't offer a future for your daughter." She looked at him confused until he heard him continue. "For me, it did." The silence was absolute. Mariana lowered her head, tears falling. Lucas stood up, went to the window, and stood there for a few seconds observing the city. "I don't hate you," he said, still with his back to her. "But I can't help you, because what you need now isn't a job. It's the time I needed to understand the value of things." He turned and walked to the door. He opened it slowly, letting the light from the hallway flood the room. Mariana walked past him without saying a word. The door closed, softly, but definitively. At that moment, Lucas realized the past no longer needed avenging. He had already won. The days following his reunion with Mariana were silent, almost strange. Lucas tried to concentrate on his work, but the memories returned like echoes of a past he thought he had already overcome. Deep down, I knew that moment was just the prelude to something bigger and inevitable. It didn't take long for fate to confirm his suspicion. On a rainy afternoon, while he was reviewing contracts, the receptionist entered his office with a tense expression. "Lucas, your parents are here." For a moment, he thought he had misheard, but her look said it all.
Time seemed to slow down. The memories, the sound of the door slamming, the cold of the street on that farewell night, it all came rushing back. "Send them in," he said, without changing his tone. His voice was firm, but his heart was pounding. When the door opened, there they were. The father, his hair now grayer, and the mother, visibly worn down. Time had taken its toll. Their eyes mixed regret and shame. "Son, we found out what happened to your sister. She told us." Lucas nodded, maintaining emotional distance. His father cleared his throat, trying to regain some authority that no longer existed. "Look, we may have been too harsh with you, but understand, we only wanted what was best. Nobody imagined that this internet thing would work out." The phrase hit him like déjà vu. For a moment he felt like laughing, not sarcastically, but at the irony of life.
That's right, Dad. I didn't imagine it either. But the difference is that, even without imagining it, I tried. The mother began to cry, murmuring apologies between sobs. Lucas took a deep breath, struggling to maintain control. There was no anger, just an old weariness, like a healed wound that still left marks. You don't need to apologize. Just don't try to justify yourselves. The silence that followed was heavy. The father looked away. The mother wiped away her tears and whispered, "We just want to be close to you again." Lucas looked at them both and felt a knot in his chest. For a brief second he thought about giving in, but he realized that forgiveness at that moment would not yet be liberation. It would be surrender. With a firm look, he replied, "Don't get me wrong, but I think the time I spent alone helped me understand what it means to be in good company. And for now, I am." The two remained still, without reaction. The mother wanted to hug him, but he took a step back, polite but resolute. "Don't hate me for not coming back. I've just learned to be at peace." When they left, Lucas sat in the chair and gazed at the city through the window. Outside, a fine rain fell, washing the glass. Inside, he felt that something had also been washed away. Perhaps the last trace of guilt that still bound him to the past. A few days later, Lucas decided to end the cycle once and for all. He called his parents and asked them to come to the office. He wanted to look them in the eye without resentment, but with the truth he had always swallowed. "We need to talk," he said calmly.
When they arrived, he greeted them in a spacious meeting room, bathed in the afternoon sun. The modern and elegant space contrasted sharply with the emotional atmosphere that was building. Gabriel, realizing the gravity of the situation, discreetly left the three of them alone. The father began the conversation as if seeking a position of control. "Lucas, I know I was wrong, but you also need to understand that things were different. We were raised to believe that only certain professions offered stability." Lucas listened in silence. "And that's why you thought only one daughter deserved support?" he asked calmly. The mother tried to intervene, but her voice failed her. "We were afraid you would suffer." He smiled sadly. "And out of fear, they made me suffer first." The phrase echoed through the room, sharp and true. Neither of them answered. For a few seconds, silence filled the room. Lucas stood up, walked to the window, and observed the reflection of the three of them in the glass. The rejected son, the repentant parents, all aged, not only by time, but by their choices. For years, I dreamed of this moment, but now that it's here, I realize I don't want revenge. I just want them to understand that what destroyed me wasn't a lack of money, it was a lack of faith. The mother began to cry again. The father, with a heavy look, seemed to finally give in. "You're right, son. We were wrong." Lucas turned and faced them. "You weren't wrong for underestimating me. You were wrong for thinking that only a diploma defines someone's worth." He took a deep breath, walked to the table, and leaned against it. "I don't want you to feel guilty. I want you to learn, because there are many Lucases out there, and what kills these young people isn't a lack of talent, it's disdain." The father lowered his head. The mother approached, weeping softly. "Can you forgive me?" He hesitated, then replied, "Someday, maybe, but not today." Gently, she opened the living room door. The mother tried to smile, but her teary eyes betrayed her regret. The father left in silence. When the door closed, the sound was soft,
but it carried the weight of a cycle that was finally coming to an end. Lucas stood there, motionless, staring at his own reflection in the glass. For the first time, he saw himself not as the victim of the story, but as someone who had managed to transform pain into strength. The past at last ceased to be a wound and became merely a memory.
The news that Mariana was going through difficulties spread quickly. Fired, in debt, and without support, she found herself alone, just as her brother once had been. It was then that, with no other options, she decided to seek him out once more. This time, there was no pride or sarcasm, just the desperation of someone who has nowhere else to go. Lucas was finishing a meeting when the receptionist announced, "Your sister is here again." He was silent for a few seconds, then replied, "Ask her to come in." When Mariana appeared in the doorway, she seemed like a shadow of the woman she once was. Her defeated gaze and trembling hands spoke volumes. "Lucas, I know I don't deserve it, but I need help," she began, her voice breaking. "I've tried everything. The office went bankrupt. I lost my apartment, my car. I have nothing left, not even pride." He watched her in silence. Each of her words seemed to echo within him like a reminder of everything he had endured. But the anger, strangely, was gone. There was only a strange peace. "Why did you come to me?" he asked calmly. She swallowed hard. "Because I have no one left. And because now I understand. I understand everything you felt. I was cruel. I was blind." Lucas stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the city below, the same horizon he had dreamed of reaching when he left home. "You know what's curious, Mariana?" he said, turning slowly. "You were right. My course didn't offer a future." She stared at him, uncomprehending, her eyes welling up with tears. And then he finished, firmly yet calmly. "My course didn't offer a future. For your daughter. For me, it's it." The silence that followed was absolute. Mariana began to cry, her hands covering her face, her body bent over with shame. Lucas remained motionless, not out of coldness, but because he understood that he no longer needed to prove anything. The past lay before him, defeated by the simple fact that he had won without needing to fight back. He opened the door calmly. The light from the hallway flooded the room, illuminating his sister's tears. "Take care, Mariana. Really. But from now on, each of us follows the path we've chosen." She left slowly, and the door closed softly, with a sound that seemed to seal the end of an era. Lucas stood there, gazing at his agency's sign reflected in the glass. "Insight Digital," it read, gleaming on the horizon. He smiled. The name, which once symbolized only a dream, now represented the rebirth of a man who had learned to be self-sufficient. The following days were silent, as if the entire universe had decided to respect this new balance. Lucas arrived at the office early, greeted the team, and felt a different kind of lightness. The weight of the past had disappeared, and in its place there was only gratitude. For the first time, he looked at his own journey without resentment. Every sleepless night, every humiliation, every swallowed tear had shaped him, not as a victim, but as someone who had learned to transform rejection into fuel.
If I hadn't been thrown out, I would never have learned to fly, he thought, smiling. On a quiet afternoon, Gabriel entered his office with 2 cups of coffee. "To celebrate the new contract," he said excitedly. Lucas raised his mug. "To the beginning that never ends." They both laughed, aware that this moment symbolized something greater, the silent victory of those who believe in themselves when no one else does. Later, Lucas was alone in the office. The sun streamed through the windows, gilding everything. He picked up the old notebook, the same one where he had written years ago, "I'm going to prove that it does have a future." She ran her fingers over the phrase and felt a shiver run down her spine. Now there was nothing left to prove. The promise had been fulfilled. Without realizing it, discreet tears streamed down her face. Not tears of sadness, but of liberation. It was the calm cry of someone who had survived their own abandonment and learned to love themselves without needing applause. While watching the sunset, her cell phone vibrated. A new message. It was from her mother. Just one line. "I understand now. Forgive me." Lucas took a deep breath and replied with a simple heart emoji. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was a start. He closed his phone, looked at the city again, and whispered to himself, "Some doors need to close so other windows can open." The reflection in the glass showed a man at peace. The boy who left home on a cold night no longer existed. In his place was someone who had learned that true success is not about having everything. It's about becoming everything they said you couldn't be.
The auditorium was packed. Young people from various parts of the country filled the seats, attentive to the stage lights. On the screen, the name of the afternoon speaker appeared. Lucas Nogueira, founder of Insight Digital. While the technicians made the final adjustments, he breathed deeply backstage. Anyone who saw him there, microphone clipped to his shirt and calm expression on his face, would never imagine how much that journey had cost him. When he stepped onto the stage, the audience greeted him with sincere applause. Lucas smiled, not out of vanity, but out of recognition, not from others, but from himself. This was the boy who left home with a backpack and a dream, and now he was there, inspiring hundreds to believe in themselves. "I didn't come here to talk about success," he began, his voice firm yet serene. "I came to talk about rejection, because sometimes it's the no that pushes you toward the most important yes of your life." The audience fell silent. He spoke about the difficult nights, the prejudice against his profession, the fear of failure, and then about the moment he realized that someone's worth doesn't depend on the recognition of others, but on faith in themselves. Each word seemed to touch a different wound in the audience. Some wept discreetly, others recorded, fascinated. Lucas looked up, and for a moment he imagined his parents were there, not as judges, but as witnesses to his transformation. "They told me my degree didn't lead to a future," she continued, smiling slightly. "And maybe they were right. The problem is that the future isn't something you study. It's something you build." Applause echoed, spontaneous and intense. At that moment, he felt something break inside him, the last link to the old pain. At the end of the lecture, dozens of young people approached to express their gratitude. One young man, with tears in his eyes, said, "My father also thinks that what I do has no future, but now I know I can prove him wrong." Lucas shook his hand, visibly moved. "You don't need to prove anything to him, just to yourself." Back in the dressing room, he sat down and looked at his cell phone. Again, a message from his mother. "Your father saw your lecture. He said he's proud of you, and so am I." This time, Lucas didn't hesitate. He calmly typed, "I also learned to be proud of myself." He put the phone away and stood up. Outside, the sunset painted the sky orange and gold, the same colors he saw through the window of his old office when he still dreamed of the impossible.
But now, the impossible was already in the past. The future was there, before him, open, immense, inviting. As she left the building, she took a deep breath of the night air and smiled. There was no more pain, no anger, no emptiness. There was only one certainty. Some stories don't end with revenge, they end with peace. Lucas looked at the horizon and murmured, "They were right. My degree didn't lead to a future. I did." And with that thought, she walked towards the illuminated street, carrying in her hands the greatest diploma anyone can earn, that of self-improvement. Sometimes, all you need to change your life is someone telling you you can do it. And if this story touched you in any way, if it reminded you of your strength or made you believe again, then sign up now. Here, each video is more than just a story. It's a reminder that nobody wins by chance. And perhaps the next winner will be you. Click subscribe and stay with us. There's still so much more to tell.